Hello, my name is Eduardo Mendez, and during this lesson we review the prosodic elements that we can find in a language. We will go through some of them, so welcome. Like we already said, we will go through some of the elements of prosody during this presentation. So first of all, we need to identify the meaning of prosody. Prosody is the study of all of the acoustic elements of language that contributes to speech, and we can find rhythm, intonation, and stress like some of them. Now, these are often be found in poetry. However, since they are a feature of all of the spoken and written languages, we can find them more commonly than what we think. First of all, we have intonation. To fully understand what intonation is, we first need to identify that intonation is a change in pitch during a speech. In other words, it is how our voice rises or falls while we are speaking. Pitch is the range of highness or lowness we use to speak. So we can have high pitch or low pitch, and pitch is controlled by our vocal cords. To better understand it, we can think of pitch as if we were making music. Human voice has a range, and our voice can fall or rise depending on the way we use our vocal cords. This being said, it is important to establish that intonation helps us to express meaning and attitude. That is what we call intonation patterns. Now, believe it or not, languages are also classified by the way they use their intonation. Now, languages like English that use intonation to express changes in meaning and changes in attitude are called intonation languages. Actually, Spanish also fall into this category. That means that intonation languages do not use their intonation to do lexical contrasts. They only do it to do contrast in meaning and in attitude. That's what we will call grammatical and attitudinal changes. This brings us to the functions of intonation in English. We actually have four functions. We have the attitudinal function, the grammatical function, the accentual function, and the discourse function. But right now, we will only focus on the attitudinal function and the grammatical function. So to fully understand the functions of intonation, we have to remember that intonation is about how our voice rises or falls. So if we talk about grammatical change, we can have two cases. One where we use a falling pitch, and the other one where we use a rising pitch. This is where we introduce intonation patterns. But before speaking of intonation patterns, let's take next sentence as an example. If I say, you got married last summer, I am using a falling pitch, and I am using it to state a fact. But if I say, you got married last summer, notice how I am expressing a bit of surprise and questioning in the way I am speaking. You got married last summer, I am actually using a fall-rise pitch, which is known as a fall-rise intonation pattern. So an intonation pattern is how we use our pitch to express something different. So we have the following intonation patterns. The first one would be the falling intonation pattern. Like we said, we can use it in statements. You got married last summer. But we can also find it on open questions, or what we know as WH questions. Listen, where did you get married last summer? I am using the following intonation pattern. But we also have the rising pattern, and we can usually find it on closed questions, right? So, also what we know as yes or no questions. Listen, for example, did you get married last summer? How I am using a rising pattern. But we also find in English what we call the fall rise intonation pattern, which it is a combination of both. It is usually used to express surprise or also politeness. Listen, for example, you got married last summer, and I am using a combination of both. Now, we also have the attitudinal function, which it helps us reflect the attitude or emotional state of someone. This can tell us if someone is happy, excited, sad, bored. But also, it is important to state that intonation it is not used alone to express emotion. We have other prosodic features that help us doing so, but right now we will only focus in intonation. Let's take for example, if I use the word hi, I can say hi to show that I am excited. I can say hi to show that I am sad. Or I can also just say hi to show that I am angry. This is why it is important to identify how we use intonation, because we can actually identify if someone is speaking to us happily, angrily, or sadly. And this is something that can help us improve our communication skills, whether we are trying to express something or we are trying to convey something. Another important feature of prosody is stress. We can say that the stress is the degree of force with which a sound or syllable is uttered. That means that the stress is a part of the word where the sound is more prominent. In addition to the definition we already gave of stress, we have that in combination with intonation, stress avoids monotony and makes the speech more interesting for the hearer. But before moving on, we can say then that the stress is highly related to syllables. Hence, we need to identify the meaning of syllable. A syllable is a small unit of speech that contains one vowel sound. Now, it is important to say that within a word, only one syllable is stressed. The syllables that receive a stress are known as stress syllables, and they have certain features. For example, they are always louder, they are longer, they have higher pitch, and they are enunciated more clearly. Likely other languages such as Spanish that actually has a graphic accent to mark stress, English doesn't use any representation graphically. So this brings out the question, how do we identify stress words? To do so, we do first need to identify uh, how many syllables a word has, but also we need to identify the longer syllable in that word. which brings us to the concept of long and short vowel sounds. Now, it is not a rule per se, but we normally find stress in long vowel sounds. However, we can classify or start identifying stress with the number of syllables we have in a word. For example, words that has one syllable are as easy as just stressing that same syllable. We have, for example, the word milk, where the syllable it's only one and we can easily identify the stress, milk. And we also have, for example, take, which is only a one syllable word. Then we have, for instance, the words of two syllables. With words of two syllables, we need to identify first which syllables have the longer vowel sound. For instance, we have hotel, we have ho and tel, and we can identify that the stress falls under the second syllable, hotel. Then we have, for instance, the word coffee, where we have coffee, and we can actually identify that the stress falls on the first syllable, coffee. Lastly, we have words of three syllables. Again, I repeat, this is not a rule, but with words of three syllables, we will usually find the stress syllable at the beginning of the word. For example, we have the word magazine, where we can find magazine. However, the stress is falling in the first syllable, being magazine. Or we can also have Saturday, which is the same case. We have Saturday, but the final word would be Saturday. To conclude this topic, we have the following quote. The importance of stress cannot be overestimated. You may have learned to pronounce a language perfectly, but if you stress words incorrectly, you will not be understood. This clearly sums up why is it important to understand the prosodic elements and to take them into practice. When we speak a foreign language, we need to do it as closely as a native speaker would be in order to allow communication to flow. Thank you.